Korean natural farming all started with a man by the name of Cho Han-kyu. Previously, Cho finished high school at the age of 27 while he worked on the family farm. He left for Japan to pursue further study in his family's profession. For 3 years, he studied agriculture research and began studying the practice of the old Japanese and Korean ways. By the time he returned to Korea in 1965, his head was full of knowledge, and Cho had just as many ideas. By combining traditional farming practices with the Asian fermentation process, Cho Han-kyu developed what we now know as the Korean Natural Farming Method, or KNF for short. The point of KNF is to avoid tilling, pesticides, and even to forego animal manure for compost, just like the Amazon does. By allowing more biodiversity, the plants themselves throw down all of the biological matter needed to create compost. The grubs and the bugs that we usually kill to protect our crops are utilized to break down all that organic matter. In other words, he wanted to work with the pests, not against them. By allowing more diversity on a single field, there wouldn't be as much focused competition on a single crop, and the diverse amount of insects that now range free keep each other's populations in check without any human intervention. One bug eats the food, another insect eats the one eating the food, and everything stays in perpetual balance, leading to a surprisingly small amount of damage by the time that the harvest comes. Actually, the losses for the KNF method are so insignificant that industrial-level farms with all of their poisons can't even begin to compete with their billions worth of losses each year. He wanted to maximize output for as little effort as possible and use what naturally grew and lived in the area to his advantage. There's still a little work involved, but exponentially less energy, labor, and financial cost than there would be with a traditional farm. It all starts with soil management. Besides alternating your rows with a diverse selection of crops, instead of the monocrop method, mulching is key. Mulching does a lot for you. Most of us just use it to retain moisture and to keep the soil temperature stable, but it also brings in microorganisms. Those critters eat and break down the organic matter from the mulch and plant waste, and they leave their own waste to feed the soil behind. And they till and aerate the soil for you without you needing to kill those hard workers by doing it yourself. And after a harvest, you leave the unused plant waste right there where they were growing before, or you ferment it. In other words, feed the soil to feed yourself. The thing is, when you bring in the bugs and the worms, they also bring funguses and even viruses. Yes, all of the things we're so hell-bent on keeping away from our precious crops are actually helping them in the long run, because like the bugs, one virus or fungus destroys another. In perpetual balance, there will be no extensive pressure or destruction from any of the usual crop killers. That's where monocrop, pesticide-ridden fields go wrong. By trying to kill everything and anything, they don't have any defenses left when a disease does take hold. That fungal or viral pest then has nothing standing in its wake, and it's free to run rampant and spread, destroying entire harvests. And without previous introductions to those viruses and funguses in small manageable amounts, the plants couldn't build up an immune resistance. Look at it this way, if the bugs don't want to eat your plants, then it's so poisonous that you shouldn't be eating it either. And what's it to you to share a little of your vegetables with nature if the damage is so insignificant that it doesn't affect your harvest at the end of the day? Then there's the fermented plant fluids, or like most people say, fermented plant juice. That's going to be the key to keeping your fields healthy. Simply put, any plant matter that you have, and on even the smallest vegetable patches, you'll have more than enough to work with. It's fermented with sugar and water. That juice is then added to the soil and sprayed over your crops. It does a lot of things. It's very high in nutrients and enzymes, thus feeding the field, and it attracts bugs. Only now the bugs will be going after the juice and not the plant. And they'll probably be eating a few bugs themselves in the process, leaving your spinach and cauliflower untouched and free to use all of those good nutrients to grow without interference. It's highly encouraged to add earthworms to the soil and to keep them in bins, to give you all of that good worm tea to add separately too. Worm tea isn't all that much different from fermented plant material, and it gives just as much sustenance to the soil as the plant juice would. Water-soluble calcium, lactic acid bacteria, and a boatload of food for the plants. Fermentation in worm juice gives you more of all of the compounds you need to feed your soil. Cinnamon, garlic, and ginger is often used in the fermentation process since it's a natural deterrent for the more destructive pests, while the bees and the worms that you actually want to have on your farm don't mind those additions at all. KNF is very much for using other herbs and spices as extracts to deter pests that might be giving you a little trouble. And most of these extracts have antifungal and antiviral properties in them already. So they act as your fungicides, pesticides, and herbicides without killing the microbial workers that you've been so carefully cultivating. And the extracts are more effective than the chemical sprays anyway. Seriously, we cannot begin to stress how many losses commercial farms have. despite their reliance on the sprays. How they're still marching to the beat of that old drum when every study proves otherwise, we'll never understand. Plant fermentation and natural pesticides is something that we'll be covering in future videos, how to make it, what it actually does for the soil and plant matter, and how it protects against invading forces. So keep that notification bell on. There's a lot more to these methods than we can possibly cover today. But for now, back to KNF. Another way pests are tackled is by luring them to the field with traps made from fermented fruit and grain. The flies and the slugs flock to those buckets and promptly drown in the solution. That solution is then used again as fertilizer. The solution itself is very nutritious, and with all of those fly and slug bodies decomposing with the mix too, well, now you have double the nutrition. KNF excludes most livestock animals, but it does include keeping chickens, and that can be extended to most of the fowl species too. The idea is to keep chickens as close to the natural ground as possible, and to use natural forms of ventilation and lighting for the hens. Using hay to layer their coops every time, instead of raking it clean, allows the grass matter to absorb their waste. It brings in bugs for them to eat for that extra protein, and it's only removed when compost or mulch is needed for the field. It's basically the deep bedding method. Go check out that video if you want to catch up on the concept. It cuts your manual labor by an enormous amount, gives you free compost and mulch, renders any odors obsolete, and the chickens get a protein supplement without the muck and disease that usually comes from a messy coop. It's cleaner, more cost-effective, and healthier for your girls overall. KNF is the traditional way of farming, but on steroids. All of the practices involved have been used for centuries in various parts of the world by many people spread across the globe. This time, all of those methods, tricks, and ways have just been rolled into one surprisingly simple, cost-effective, and overall natural system where every single part of the farm helps another. Constant motion, a never-ending tit-for-tat from one row to the next, and perpetual balance, just like it should be. Don't go out of your way to drive nature away, invite it in. Since its creation, KNF has blown production and profits out of the roof, and it just keeps getting better and better every year. What, did you think the method stopped evolving when Cho retired? Not even a little. Only this time, it's not just one man working on his own. Universities across Asia have been extending their studies with natural pesticides and organic farming practices since the 80s, slowly introducing it into the farming sector more and more every year. It's estimated that KNF, in some form or another, will be utilized on a majority of farmlands in Korea, Japan, and China within the next 50 years. Because it works, that's why. And for you, it doesn't have to be a to-the-letter application of the system. By incorporating just a few of the methods, you'll be making an enormous difference on your property, not just for nature, but for your produce health and production too. So start with one method and add more over time as you need it or as you can fit it in. KNF is an organic approach, so there's no reason why you can't allow it to organically grow and extend on your property too. The more diverse your soil is, the more diverse your fruits will be also. Until next time, love the land and it'll love you back tenfold. Leave a like, and if you like this video, why not have a look at some of the videos on your screen right now. See you next week. Cheers!